Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road2College, and I'm here tonight with Whalen, who is one of our Road2College college counselors. Sorry, I am just looking through the Zoom app because they must have changed it recently. So I can't find one of my settings. So that's what I found it. Okay. So thanks everyone for showing up tonight, Sunday, 8 o'clock on East Coast, 5 o'clock West Coast, somewhere in between in the middle of the country. Tonight we're going to talk about the Common App, which has been open now for a few weeks. We've done a variation of this talk a few times so far this summer, but tonight Ellen's going to add a little bit more about essays and tips for your students writing the essay, in addition to, tips on the Common App itself. So let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. Ellen, I'm going to spotlight you so it's easy for people to see, and I'm going to spotlight myself.
Debbie, I forgot to mention, could we ask a question like we did last time?
Definitely.
Okay, so my question is, if people want to type in, what is the topic your student is considering writing their main essay or personal statement, goes by those two names, about, and I'll give you like really short topics like writing about a grandparent, writing about a sport they play, writing about a service trip, maybe through their church. Like those are just three potential examples. So just keep it tight so we can read it quickly. And I just want to see like what the commonalities are.
Great. Yeah. So put that into, okay, I'm just curious. So Dawn, you're the first person, you wrote a struggle. Is that the actual topic, or is it a struggle for your student to figure something out, which could be the case?
Topic, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. And while you guys are putting all of those into the chat, let me just do my standard housekeeping, which is that these are Zoom meetings. They aren't webinars. I always say that because people come in you come in muted. If you really want to ask a question, you can unmute. But a lot of times people are asking questions in the chat, which is perfectly fine. And up to you. A few people I see already, but if you're willing to put your video on, it's always nice to see people's faces. It makes us feel a little bit more connected, like we're not just talking to these black and blank screens. So, but that's up to you. This is recorded and it will be shared tomorrow through an email. And I think we could get started. Ellen, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about yourself, and then we can share slides.
Yes, I'm enjoying reading.
I know, yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Whalen. I have been working with Debbie. This is my fourth season.
Fourth year, yeah.
And I've been a college admissions counselor since 2017. I graduated from Wellesley with a BA in economics and Spanish. I worked in Fortune 500 companies doing sales and marketing. And then when my daughters were born, I became a professional writer and editor. And then I got into this field knowing that my daughters would be going to college, and I'm very curious. And so I just delved into it. So that's my background. And if we're ready, I'll share my screen. Let me go into okay, great. Yep. I have it all primed. I just want to make sure. Sometimes
and Ellen, maybe we'll, after it'd be interesting. I'm kind of looking at some of these topics to just go back and kind of make a comment or two on like some of them.
Yeah, exactly. Debbie, I'm like, I haven't done, it's a view, right? Yeah. Okay. Got it. I haven't done in a bit. So yes. All right.
So yeah, we can see.
Yes. Good. All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about mastering the Common App, application, and essay tips. So like Debbie said, this is a talk I've done before, but I'm adding on to it with the essays, since that's a big something that a lot of kids are focused on right now. So since college has changed a lot since we went to college, and students today are applying to more colleges. A balanced list is more important than ever, and students need financial safeties. The majority of colleges do accept the majority of students. and the average acceptance rate is 67%. So as you've been looking at colleges, you might have noticed they can begin to look alike. Students, there are an abundance of students, many more students than there are colleges. So students look alike to schools. And so how does a student stand out with competitive, highly competitive colleges, which I'm defining as having an acceptance rate of 30% or less? What are these competitive colleges looking for today? They're looking for well-rounded classes, not well-rounded students generally. Generally, they're looking for students that excel in a certain area to then have a well-rounded class. Competitive colleges have an abundance of students with 4.0s and good test scores. And so they have terms for these types of students, standard positive, standard strong, and like many others. So highly competitive colleges want to pointy students, lopsided students, students with a hook, however you want to define it. And this is where a strong narrative, or another way of saying it, like weaving whatever message your student wants to get across about whether it has to do with their major they want to study, or some personal skills they have or qualities that they want to stress throughout their application to help them stand out. So you might be wondering, hey, my kid's not applying to a highly competitive or highly rejected college, what's in it for me tonight? And there are lots of pieces about what we're going to talk about that are going to be beneficial. So a strong narrative and depths of activities can help, with competitive colleges, like I've said, but it can also help with maximizing merit. It can help if your student is trying to get into honors colleges or programs. It can help, I can't read my screen, so I've got to, there we go. Getting into the state flagship universities like UVA. It can help with local scholarships, and it can help with the more competitive majors, which are made more competitive by gender. And you might ask, what are the most competitive majors? And here they are. The 6 most, oops, I stopped my share by mistake. You can't, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it, Ellen, you're fine.
Okay, I can't see my, I don't know what just happened, Debbie. Let me see if I can switch myself. I was minding my own business. I think the view, let me get out of full screen. I'm sorry. I don't know. Let me stop my share.
Okay,
and
now
see if
you're
I
not
go back.
sharing.
Yeah, let me go back in. I don't know why I can't see it. Okay, I'm back again. All right.
Okay, yep, all good.
Just want to get, I've got too many people in my way. So let me smush these guys. It did it again. As I was trying to move people, I'm going to stop my share again and go in again. All right, I'm just going to ignore, hopefully I can keep reading it easily. Okay, 6 most popular majors: computer science, engineering, psychology, nursing, business/economics, if a liberal arts school, a small school that doesn't have a business college, and the biological sciences for pre-med. Pre-med is not a major, but the biologicals, chemistry, biology lead often to pre-med. So those are the most popular majors. Now, you might be wondering if a strong narrative is important, what's still under the control of a senior? Because I'm sure we have a lot of senior parents here. Essays, which I'm going to go into much more, such as the personal statement or the college-specific essays like why this major. Those are still under students' control. Activities, a lot of those are set, but some of them they can add more depth, or they might get more leadership. The senior year grades, those are still possible. Some schools like the UCs don't look at the senior year grades, but most colleges do. Test scores, they might still be able to take a test, or they can ponder whether or not to submit test scores. Course selection, some of this, if school's already started, that might not be possible. I wrote this up earlier in the summer, but the major they're considering applying to for college, it's if their narrative supports it, an undersubscribed major can make it easier to get in. So I want to show how the University of Urbana, Illinois, Urbana-Champaign is very transparent about their college admit rates. So most colleges do not disclose the individual acceptance rates per college under their university umbrella. And this does not include in-state versus out-of-state. It's the whole collective. Out-of-state students are going to have an even lower acceptance rate, but you can see the range here, with the lowest being 7.5% for computer science. And the highest is the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences. So that is where applying to a college that is less popular can make it easier for a student to get into, but they obviously have to be interested in that type of major that would be found in that college. All right, so continuing with what seniors can still do, they can make sure they have a balanced college list. A lot of students that, when I look over their Common Apps, they have a lot of, it's often top heavy. Letters of rec. Have they asked their teachers for a letter, and have they asked the right teachers that support potentially their major or are going to write good letters for them? Interviews. Not every college has the ability to interview, but check to see if the colleges your students considering do, and interview. Sign up as soon as you can, because they can run out. A student of mine was telling me she thinks one of the schools she's looking at might not have any more. Demonstrate interest and continue to, even if you have. Usually the large public universities don't care about demonstrated interest, but reaching out to an admissions officer, visiting a campus, doing an online talk, interviewing, those are all ways to demonstrate interest. Soft factors are something a student can weave into their essays, for example. Maybe a teacher might also highlight if a student is always very thoughtful and helping other, their peers. Things like that could still be under their control. And future plans. We're going to go over future plans. That's a piece of the Common App where a student says, what do they want to do professionally? Does that support their major? So those are 12 tips as to what a student can still control. Now I'm going to talk about quickly items out of a student's control. Those are called the college's institutional priorities. Just because a student, might be even a valedictorian, it doesn't mean that that student has what that college is looking for, or that there aren't an abundance of that type of student and they're looking for, certain athletes. Like they've had their top baseball pitcher has moved on, so they need some more pitchers coming in. They need to balance their budget, so they need full pay students, or students that are going to pay the most if they're discounting for everyone. But so that's an important piece that's out of your family's control. A lot of schools have a problem with having too many young women applying and not enough young men. I think the average rate is like 65%, Debbie, something like that, females to males nationally. But when you're looking at engineering schools, there are usually, it can be as much as 70% young men versus young women. So know the type of school your students applying to and understand that that may hurt them or help them. And then so then I was just having trouble reading it. Filling a new program, like that can be an institutional priority. Maybe your student is interested in a major that is newly set up at that college. A new program like data science used to be like 4 or 5 years ago, a very popular new major. Anyway, that may or may not be in your student's control. Okay, so that all being said, I'm going to jump now into essays. So these are some essay mistakes to avoid. So I noticed there was a variety of topics that people put in the chat, but some of these common ones did come up, which are sports, service trips, and writing about grandparents. Now, it's not to say people can't write about these. Now, it's just that they are common. So if a student's going to write about these topics, they have to try to come at it from a different angle, or maybe use it as an entry point, but the whole essay maybe isn't just about sports. For example, one of the issues that we tend to see about grandparents, and this is what I've noticed, is the essay can be all about how great grandma or grandpa is, and then the admissions officer says, wonderful, let's admit them, but they're not applying to the college, the student is. So the grandparent can be mentioned, but it needs to be mostly about the student in the context of maybe what their grandparent has taught them, but more of their reflection and growth about themselves. So Debbie, you want to mute someone?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So the admissions officers will talk about like the 3 or 4 Ds. They often divorce, death, depression, and dogs. I didn't put the dogs in. I think a lot of kids might talk about their pets too much, similar to the grandparents. And it's tough because obviously if parents have divorced, that's a big thing in their life, but it can be a common topic. It can just be, I personally haven't read about divorce, but it's supposed to be a common topic. And I've just heard admissions officers say, don't talk about it. And then death, that's just a tough one too. And students talking about their mental health. That's, students need to put their best foot forward, and the colleges have a mental health crisis on their campus. And it's really best to, unless a student can show huge distance and growth from something like that, which is rare because usually they're in the thick of it, it's just generally best to avoid that topic. And then, of course, just crazy sounding, but some kids write about bathrooms, business. It's just, or breaking up with a boyfriend and girlfriend. So avoiding those topics is best. So moving on to different approaches in essays, I've seen kids that pretty much just are listing their activities, stringing them together with 1 or 2 sentences a piece. So do not do that. There's no depth. There's no reflection. That's basically a resume. So another mistake I commonly see is 80% of the essay is focused on time before high school. It needs to be, 20-30% might be about their time before high school, but it really needs to be about, the past 2-3 years, because we want to see growth and reflection and how they've overcome challenges. And that's about them today as adults, approaching adulthood. The essays need to be succinct. The more succinct they are, the more room the student has to expand upon the essay. This type of writing is not students don't have a lot of experience with this type of writing. It is not a generic 5-paragraph writing piece that they're used to in English. So it takes time. Writing is rewriting. I often see 7-8 drafts. And then forgetting who their audience is. AOs are not their admissions officers. AOs are not their best friends. They need to be aware that they're, writing this to a professional. Often they're in their 20s, but they might get someone who's in their 40s or 50s. So they just need to be mindful of using, proper language and anyway, not be too familiar. All right, so starting with an attention-catching opening line is helpful if possible. And Stanford magazine had some lines back in 2008, and you can pull up the article. I just took a few examples. I never seen anyone get so excited about mitochondria, was how one student began their essay. Some fathers might disapprove of their children having noxious chemicals in the garage. When I was in 8th grade, I couldn't read. I changed my name each time I place an order at Starbucks. So you can see there's a range of different ways to start an essay, and they all are, intriguing. You probably want to read more. Admissions officers are bored speed readers. They probably read every single essay topic under the sun. So trying to come at it at a different angle to get them to slow down. 60 applications a day is on the light side. Some of them do 100, and that's every day for a while. So they are definitely tired. Rick Clark, who's at Georgia Tech, he's had a blog and now he's got a promotion, so he's not doing it as much, but he has said some very interesting I wanted to read his quotes. He's been very frank and to the point. So he said in this particular blog posting, I know many readers who read the first and last paragraphs. He's talking about the admissions officers, and only go back if those are compelling. Otherwise, it's a dime a dozen and the ratings are average. And then he continued and said, some schools will tell you that 2 separate readers evaluate every essay. Given the volume, staff sizes, and compressed timelines between application deadlines and decision release, that seems a blatant lie and at best an incredibly inefficient process. So he's definitely not pulling any punches. Okay, so that all being said, now let's focus on some essay tips to consider besides having a great first opening line. There are generally considered to be 2 approaches. A chronological, meaning like starting from whatever age and moving forward, or versus a montage. And I'm going to get a little bit later on, I'm going to give an example of with one student 2 different ways to approach an essay in these 2 different formats. And a montage is where a student maybe uses one piece, maybe they're in their bedroom and they're looking at the photographs on their desk as they're doing their homework, and then they touch upon what each photograph, the memory it captures, and maybe it has something to do with a common thread. So that's a montage essay. And usually then they come back to, after they go through the different stories, they come back to where they began. So essays, as I've said repeatedly already, should show growth and reflection. The student's voice should come through. The details that the student gives, even if it's a more common topic, it's the details that make the essays unique. Students should try to show more than they tell, maybe bringing in their senses for details like smell and sight. I find reading the essay out loud with students when I'm editing it, if I happen to be editing with them, that can really help to catch mistakes and see if it flows well. And students need to check grammar and spelling. With tools like Grammarly, there really shouldn't be, there should be few mistakes that way. Okay, so just to give you a place that you can check and see some good examples, if you Google essays that worked, Johns Hopkins, Hamilton College, and Connecticut College, they all list essays of accepted students and share them online. So they have a variety of them. So I recommend, instead of me reading some essays, that you just check those out. All right. So
Ellen, can I just interrupt one thing? Somebody
Yes.
asked, it's a fairly, decent question, saying, when you mentioned how many applications an admissions officer goes through, in a day, and, they're human, they are going to get tired. So they said, is the kids' efforts for naught? Spending as much time on these essays if they're really, admissions officers are going to go through them that quickly.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you never know. So I hope that if a student is able to catch the admissions officer's eye through, outstanding extracurriculars, a really good lead into their essay, that admissions officer is going to slow down. There are going to be some students that just do not make the mark academically, and they're not going to spend that much time on that application. So it averages out. It's hard to say, but if a student does catch their eye, then depending upon the approach the admissions uses, some use committee where an admissions officer has to maybe 2 of them are reading the application together and they both take notes, and then they might present that student to committee, and they have to then look back on their notes and fight for that student and try to get them to be admitted. So I think it's a matter of student doing their best to make sure they are shining as much as possible. They have well-written essays, and that hopefully it gets the admissions officer to slow down.
Yeah, I actually wrote back and I kind of said similar to what you did, but kind of took like a different approach in that the better the essay is, the easier it is to get through. And I think that ease actually stands out. You know what I mean? If the admissions officer can easily read something, get the essence of what the student wants to get across, and doesn't have to spend a lot of energy figuring it out, I think that kind of raises, that type of application more to the top.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also add, Debbie, that, and this is a tip I forgot to put in, and there are just so many tips. I could easily do a 2-hour talk on essays, but making bite-sized paragraphs. Kids will give me a wall of words with, no, just one paragraph. And I don't even want to read it in that. It's just, it's overwhelming. So paragraphs, shorter, and it helps them to read it more quickly too, and digest it more easily. So that, I agree with you on that too, Debbie. Okay. So now we're going to look at a sample student that I made up, but he's a composite of many I've seen this season. I'm going to go over probably 400 Common Apps, and it's a composite of different male students that I've seen over time. And so I'm going to show how we're going to make a narrative that's going to support this student to help have him shine through what he wants to study and characteristics he wants to convey. All right, so the student I made up was Jack. And so he goes to public school. He has 3.9 GPA. He's got good test scores of 1440. He is a future engineer, so he's taken physics, calculus, and online classes. He's a member of the National Honor Society. He's on the varsity soccer team, and he's in student government, and he's involved with composting. So you can see kind of a typical student. So outside of school is where Jack begins to look a little different, like with a lot of students. He's a Boy Scout. He has the Eagle Scout Award. He's helping out his aging grandmother. He works in a burger joint. He likes to tinker, and he prides himself on a never give up attitude. So that is Jack. And you might ask, how do you tie these varied elements together to make a cohesive narrative that can be reduced down to one sentence? So this could be Jack's like elevator pitch, say in an interview. And it also might be something that an admissions officer would condense down themselves as they see these elements in Jack's application. But it would be Jack is a natural tinkerer, problem solver, activist, and Eagle Scout with a sense of humor and empathy who uses his engineering abilities and talents to help his community. And we'll see this more as we look at the Common App. Some of these elements, obviously, I didn't touch upon, but that's kind of the idea of what we'd like to see woven throughout his application. So we're going to look at Jack's Common App through the eyes of an admissions officer. But before that, I think Debbie wants to touch upon.
Sure. This is just if anybody out here, needs help. Ellen has been working with me for 4 years. We have other counselors as well who help students. As we like to say, we meet you wherever your student is at. So if somebody needs help with essay coaching, and I see earlier somebody said, how do you come up with topics? That is something that coaches can help with. I mean, I really stress the word coach because we are not at all here to write things for students. It's all about helping them come up with, the topic that best reflects who they are. The narrative, as Ellen is talking about tonight, that really kind of pulls together maybe their interest and their what they want to study in college. So these different packages can help in different ways. If your student just needs help with essays, we can focus on that. Some actually, to tell you the truth, the most popular is people get the combination of a Common App and essay, and so that way we help with the essay, and then as Ellen is going through tonight, we go through with a fine-tooth comb the Common App, because there's other sections of the Common App besides the personal essay that are important, and particularly the activity section, which Ellen will go through tonight. And then lastly, sometimes people kind of just want like a review of everything. So are the colleges that their students are applying to the right set of colleges? And then, the essay and the Common App. So, our goal, or my goal, has always been with these, with everything we do, it's to give as much information as possible that a lot of people can walk away tonight and do it all on their own. But if you need extra help, we're here. So just wanted to let people know, and you'll probably get some emails about us if you want to pursue any of this.
Great, thank you, Debbie. All right, I'm going to stop my share for a moment because I have to get into my Common App. I made up a okay, escape. All right. I almost had that problem again, Debbie, but I didn't. I got stuck last time. Okay, so I have my Common App here, and now I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so here we go. Okay, you can see the Common App, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see up here it says Welcome Jack, and it's a practice application. So parents can do one of these if they want to. And I will quickly show you that students would go in and choose their colleges that they want to pin to a list. I have a random bunch of colleges here. They go to their dashboard. You can see the different colleges, and then they can drill down into a college. Like if I drill down to Harvard, then you can just see writing requirements. And here are some of them. If we go into comments, short answers, they're kind of hidden. So here are short answer ones. So yeah, that's what they're under. They're under short answers. And you can see short answers of 150 words. So I don't think that that's very short. They're not yes and no's, let's put it that way. So students need to go through every school that they have and answer all the questions to see. Sometimes they might say, are you interested in the honors college? And if they say yes, an essay can pop up. Or they might say, do you want to be an engineer? And then an engineering specific essay might pop up. So I recommend that students do that. Now I'm going to go from here to the common part of the Common App. So the Common App is there's the common part is what sent off to every single college. It's got the biological information, it's got the personal statement, the main essay, and it's got the activities. Every time a student sends off their application, it is a unique application being sent off one at a time to each university. So if the first one goes off, application, and a student finds a mistake, they can go into the Common App and make changes. The application that was sent cannot be changed because that is gone, but all future applications can have that mistake fixed. So people always have a question about that. So I want to just make that point right up front. Okay, so this is Jack. I'm going to get into education for Jack. And so there are a bunch of questions about education, and it looks kind of complex, but if I just hit the preview, this is what those questions reduce down to. So I'm going to quickly just show you before the activities, some of the pieces of the Common App. So education, he did not take a year off or anything, so he had no change in progression. Graduation date, I should have been putting this, I should change it to 2025. You know what? I'm going to do that right now, just to show you how easy it is to do. And then we're going to say graduation June, and there we go. And I'm going to hit preview, and now it will be fixed. Yay. Okay, so rank, they give you the option of saying, singular numbers or deciles or no rank. I just said he happens to have decile top ranking, and he's in the top 10% of his class. GPA, they give you weighted, unweighted options. Generally, people say go with whatever makes your student look best, or ask your guidance counselor which they prefer you do. I chose unweighted for Jack. His school doesn't weight in my mind. Okay, so they want to know senior year classes. And so if we look at this, we see that Jack has 3 APs. So it's showing that he has rigor, and the fact he has AP Calc BC, that's more advanced than the AB. And normally we'd also have Jack's transcript. In this case, we only have his senior year courses. But like I said, we can see he has rigor, and then we can see that he has the 5 years, the 4 years of the 5 course subjects, in that we're assuming he's been taking them all along. So math, science, English, a language, and history. So the more competitive college, the more they want to see 4 years in the 5 course subjects. And so he also has, interestingly, guitar building and robotics. So it sounds like he's a STEM kid. As you know, admissions officers not knowing anything about him yet. He has 2 awards, the Eagle Scout, which is national, and then the National Honor Society, which is a school award. So future plans, I'm going to go show you. If I go down to future plans, what this looks like. So students have the option. Oh, I chose other, but let me go. They have the option of choosing. You can see writer, veterinarian, teacher, scientific researcher. If you scroll down to the bottom, they can put other, and then they can write in 100 characters what they want to do. And shoot, I jumped ahead. All right. And so if I go back to preview, we can read easily future plans, other. Mechanical engineer, to create devices, solutions to make the world more accessible for the elderly, and he wants to get a master's. So you can just see that we're beginning to see a narrative, understand how Jack is what he's looking to do in the future, and how focused he is. And so as an admissions officer, I think I'd be intrigued and want to learn more. So now we're going to just jump to testing quickly. And I will, if a student wants to share their test scores, they can say yes. And if they don't, at certain colleges, they can hit no. So they can toggle back and forth depending upon the college and the strategy they're taking. But in this case, Jack, for whichever fictitious college he's applying to. This case, we're putting his test scores in, and you can see them. And he also, now we see that he has taken 2 AP classes, probably junior year, and he got a 4 and a 5. So right now, without seeing his transcript, we know he has at least 5 APs, which is again showing some rigor. Okay, now that I showed that, I'm going to jump into activities, which is really the heart of the Common App besides the essay. And there are 10 activities, and these are really fleshed out. In September, I'm going to be doing a talk on Common App mistakes, and then I'll be going into showing some more variety and what I typically see, and then how to improve upon them. I just want to show there's an arrow here, so you can move activities up and down. If I move the arrow back up, Eagle Scout goes to the top again. So order matters, and grouping certain activities together also matters. So I'm going to hit preview, and this is what it looks like in the end. And students can print out a PDF when they have filled out their whole application. And if you find it's easier to go over it that way with like a red pen, they can do that. And generally an application ends up being, depending upon how many supplemental essays there are, maybe 13 to 15 pages, something like that. And okay, so what I want to show here is that if you look at it quickly, I have the title. So there's 50 characters for the title. 100 for the org name and 150 for the description. There are 300 characters in total, and the student has the option to fill out 10 activities. And I want to show that I like to put in bold just the title because it pops. So Eagle Scout, Tinkerer, engineering student, grandson and jack of all trades, composting activist. So they just pop. So that's a little trick. And so I have put a lot into this. It takes time to craft it, to get everything to make it tight and have punch. So petition / plan trail stairs, Boy Scouts of, so that's his title, Eagle Scout, petition / plan trail stairs, 50 characters more or less. Then Boy Scouts of America, right? I could have ended there, but I put a colon, member since age 8, 30 scouts in troop, 200 plus active scouts in town. We know this is a big scouting community. It sounds impressive. And then he goes into what he specifically did, manage 5 scouts, built stairs and railings so people of varying abilities can enjoy trail, problem solved engineering challenges, volunteer with seniors. So, you know, beginning to see what Jack is about, how he's implementing his engineering skills and interests. And so science and math, so students can choose, you know, these different drop-down lists of what their activities fall under. And so his title here is Tinkerer, right? It's something he does at home. Enjoy taking apart appliances and cars. So that's the full title. And now this is the org name. And I took license and just said creative license and said home projects and help and neighbors when needed. Watch endless repairman YouTube videos to learn. And now this is the description. Tinkered since age 5. Rebuilt car engine on 1990 Camaro with dad. Fixed appliances, built a computer, problem solve and assist others. So he could just say he likes to tinker, you know, and he's put, you know, things, taking things apart and together, and he could just say that. But this, we learned so much more about him through this. And over on the left, you can see that he's doing this on average 4 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. He's been doing it his whole high school career. Then the next one, and you can see I'm bundling all engineering type of activities together because he's applying to be an engineering student. He's not applying to be an athlete. Now, some athletes are recruited and that can be a different matter. And every situation is different, but in this case, even though Jack does play soccer, it is not his lead activity. So engineering student at edX.org. He took 3 self-paced and in-depth courses over 2 summers, MIT's Advanced Fluid Mechanics and something from Stanford, so 2 from MIT. You can see that, and apply learning to hands-on projects. So that's helpful to know. Now we're going to switch, and he's got family responsibilities. A lot of students have to help out with families, with their family. So grandson and jack of all trades. Help grandmother when assistance needed, making repairs around her house. And so that's the org name. And the description is go on walks together. As she aged, found she had trouble on her favorite walk, talked to the senior center and town to build stairs, promoted access. So we're learning a little bit more about that ties in with his Eagle Scout project. And then school, student government. A lot of students are involved with student government. So leading with composting activist in bold and class representative. So high school government and composting committee initiated and led new program in 11th. So he's using action verbs, initiated and led. And impact is really important. So in this one, we're going to have some numbers. Helped create a composting program in school cafeteria, manage a team of students, connected with composting company, composted 3,000 pounds per year of food waste. So that's impact. And he does about 3 hours per week, 40 weeks a year. And then he also works. So he has a little fun with this, and you can see his sense of humor. Expert burger flipper, make 300 burgers a shift. Again, numbers, Joe's Burgers, fresh fast food, pick up extra shifts when needed. And then suggested and implemented faster processes. He's an engineer, so he's always has that mindset. Team leader, train new employees. Many students train new employees and don't mention it. Closed restaurant, greet customers with a smile, take pride in my work. And then the last one is soccer. So he is a bench warmer extraordinaire and team cheerleader. So having a little fun with the titles. And varsity soccer, help assist with elementary school players on Saturdays. Cheer team on, keep team stats, love the sport. Whether playing or watching, always trying to improve and stay in shape. One most improved player. So those are the activities. I think there are only 7, but you can see we learn a lot about Jack from them, and they are fully fleshed out, almost all of them using the 300 characters.
Ellen, let me just share with
Yes.
people, I think I was talking to a former admissions officer from Cornell just the other day, and I asked her what's some of the biggest mistakes that she sees, and she was reviewing applications, particularly the Common App. And basically, one of the biggest she said is that in the activity section, there were too many acronyms or abbreviations of activities. And quite honestly, kind of going back to the comment of time, they just don't have the time to figure it out. So if your student writes in the activity section, either some, uses initials like, the AWT, club, and doesn't explain what that is, they just won't know. Like and they'll just skim on and go to the next section. They just don't have time to figure it out. So, and that goes along with what everything Ellen's trying to show here. The faster that you can kind of bring the information to their attention in an easy to read way where they can very quickly see the impact that, that the student made or what this activity is, it's just going to benefit your student because they're going to understand your student. They're going to be able to, absorb what they did and factor it into the bigger picture. Otherwise, they just glance over and go to and then just go to the next thing, and that piece gets lost if they can't understand it.
Yes, and to build upon that, same with honors. If it's an honors that's just an award that's just at your school and you're using it like the acronym, or just saying, the John Doe Award, and they don't qualify what the John Doe Award is, it has no weight. So that's something to consider with honors also. Okay, so I'm going to jump into writing now. And so in writing, there are a few sections. So the personal essay, though they're all the essay topics they can use for the personal statement. I always say to just share an essay of any topic of your choice. These can be great for essay prompts for the person that wants to know how did they get started. But ultimately, most admissions officers don't even look at the prompts. I know I don't. Back in the 4 or 5 years ago, there was not the option for share an essay of your choice, so the prompt was more important, and now it isn't. Anyway, so I'm going to share my screen so that we can you can see what the notes I wrote in the essay. And so I did 2 type of approaches. The main essay is 650 words, right? So it should tie in and strengthen Jack's narrative. So I made an example, I outlined an example of a montage type essay for Jack. So he could use his stick to it attitude and desire to help others, opening with sitting on the bench during a soccer game. So here it's a soccer essay, right? But it's not going to stay on the soccer field. And you might say, I use this example, but you might not even want to start with soccer because the admissions officer might say, oh gosh, another sports essay, right? but if it's quickly changes, he's on the bench, right? So as he's cheering on his team, he begins to think about reflecting on other areas in his life. And he thinks about tinkering by himself with his dad. He thinks about his grandmother and how he helped her, with his Eagle Scout project so that she could walk on this trail that she loved. And he built stairs as her knees began to fail. He maybe could add something new that we haven't learned yet about him. That maybe it could be a physics class project that he did. And it could be how he sets up study groups for math class after school. So some new material can come in, and then he can come back to the soccer and where he thinks about his future and what he wants to do. So that's a rough outline. I might not do soccer at all, but that was like an idea that might be more of a common type of approach that could be fine. So the next essay is a chronological type essay outline. And so Jack could choose to focus more on his engineering by opening with a story when he was younger, where he had all pieces of maybe an appliance, like a blender he had taken apart, are lying about him. And he slowly is figuring out how to put everything back together. And from there, he introduces us to new projects, and maybe he highlights how he does this repeatedly, like enjoying the challenge of working on the Camaro with his father. So he could give some examples of that. Maybe the projects get harder. And then he could also talk about how he wanted to make his grandmother's knees better, but he can't fix everything as much as he's good at being a tinkerer. And instead, he problem solved it and figured out that he would make the path more accessible. And then from there, he could finish with being excited about bigger projects. I used excited twice there. I see that. That he's excited to tackle in college and life, and he could be specific about what those might be. So that would be a chronological type essay. So those are my ideas for what Jack could potentially write about. There can be many other ways to take it. Now, the additional information section is the last part of the writing, and a lot of people do not take advantage of this section. There are two pieces to it. The first one is when COVID started, this extra essay was added. It is broadened now for like natural disasters. Most students probably should not be writing about COVID. It happened too long ago, unless they had a really big, they were impacted, that something's still impacting them today. Other than that, I would say most people are not going to be using this particular essay space, but if they had a natural disaster, sadly, that could be used here. And this is short. I think it's 250 words. Yes, it is. Okay, but the additional information section, a lot of people do not take advantage of this. It's 650 words. It is not a space to upload a resume. It is not. Some colleges let students upload resumes through the Common App. It's not a space to add a wonderful essay that you wrote for another college that you just think should be in here. It is a space to add depth. Maybe when we talked about that honors award, that maybe needs more detail than like top student in math. Maybe this high school honors award that no one's heard of outside of their high school. Maybe you can go into detail here about it a little bit, be the specifics of the what the student has to the qualifications for it. But here, Jack, if we come back to Jack, could give more details on his Eagle Scout project, just bullet points, not too much. If he, say, had a newspaper article because someone wrote about him with this project, maybe he would put a link here. An admissions officer may or may not click on it. Some are told not to, but it would be provide evidence that the student's putting the link in there. It could be something that a student also shares with like a counselor and a teacher. Maybe they mention it also in a letter of rec so that there's evidence. People are providing evidence that what Jack said he has done, that they agree that he has done. Also, he could have a maker's portfolio or maker portfolio. I think it's called a maker portfolio. And he could provide a link to a website where he shows projects about his repairs and stuff, different projects he's tackled. Some schools actually like maker portfolios and ask for them, and they can be uploaded through Slide Room, which is a platform that's used for doing things like that. It could be something going on in school. So AP restrictions. My school only lets us take 2 AP classes in 11th and 3 and 12th. That's interesting. So Jack has taken the most rigor he could at his school, which is 5 APs. So that's good context. Class conflicts can be a great thing to explain in the additional information section. And he wrote, I wanted to take AP computer science, but I had a conflict with AP physics. So I chose AP Lit instead, making me a better writer. I then took Stanford's Computer Science 101 on edX.org and learned a great deal that will help me as a future engineer. So that is what he put in the additional information section. And I could have put that into, I'm sorry, doesn't matter, but I could have done it in preview so you could have seen it better. So that's the additional information section. And I made it bold and underlined it to make it easy and quick to read. So the admissions officer might go, yeah, I wanted to know more about the Eagle Scout project. There it is. So that is, that's it on my end, Debbie. I covered everything.
Okay. Well, we've got lots of interesting questions. Let me ask your opinion on this, Ellen. There's a question here actually from a few people. How do admissions officers really know that students are telling the truth in the activity section?
So they don't necessarily, right? Teachers could be confirming, like I said. Obviously, they cannot take the time to dig into everything. I have heard some stories of, let's say a student has started a nonprofit and they've raised, I don't know, $50,000. I've heard that like an admissions officer one time, like kind of dug into the company and found out that one of the biggest donors was the father. So
if it sounds too good to be true, they might dig in, but
yes,
but
exactly.
But we can't say for sure that they're not going to fact check everything.
Yes, but again, if there's something amazing that a student did and the counselor and a teacher do not mention it, that sounds a little suspicious. And sometimes if admissions officers are intrigued by a student and they do have a question, they will call the high school counselor. They don't do that all the time, not for every student, but if a student sounds really good, but they have questions, they might call.
So kind of similarly, somebody asked, what should they be including in like both the parent brag sheet and the student brag sheet that they fill out to give to either the school counselor or even the teachers?
So I'm going to stop my share, Debbie, just
sure.
Okay, and if I need to go back into it, I will. So in it, what I suggest they do is write a cover letter. That's what I suggest. And it should be specific for each teacher. A teacher the student should be asking the right teacher, right, to begin with for a letter of rec. So being that he wants to be an engineer, at the very least, he should be asking, Jack should be asking for a math or a science teacher at the very least. MIT happens to want a humanities and a STEM teacher. Most colleges are not that specific. So it's important to look and see what each college is looking for, and then at least start with those teachers. But if a student, let's just take the MIT example, let's just take Jack. If he were to use his English teacher, he could do a cover letter and say, I know you're really busy. Could you please, I would love it if you could highlight these aspects, attach my resume. These are the schools I'm applying to. And I would love it if you could talk about how my writing has improved over time and that I really try to, make my language accessible, because when I become an engineer, I want my writing to be approachable and for people to be able to understand.
Or if there was a project that they did really well in the class, to highlight that, because I mean, honestly, teachers are human. They'll remember your student, but maybe they don't remember every detail about how your student did that year. So
Yeah.
kind of just as the student is trying to make the essay and the activities section as easy as possible for the reader to digest, you're also providing as much information as possible to recommenders to make it easy for them to write the letters of recommendation. So if you can highlight what either the student, the student can highlight what they did well in the class, what they want the teacher to focus on, it just makes their part of the process easier, and and you'll probably get a better recommendation out of it as well.
Yes, and they might just lift out what you wrote, pieces of it, and put it in their letter. And then just to finish it off, Jack can go to their, his physics teacher and say, talk about, yes, remember I did this project outside of class, or we had that particular lab and this was the result, or I asked for extra reading outside of class to follow up on, a discussion, things like that they can remind the teacher.
So, Ellen, there's a question here, and really basically about a student who might be middle of the road, like if you want to, say like a B student, and like it feels like sometimes when we do these presentations, we focus on like Jack, he's a STEM student, he had all these activities, he's taking APs. And so what does that mean for the B student? Like, it sounds like, they're not going to be able to get into college, but that's not the case.
Yes, it's not the case. So I would just, what does your student do like in a week, right? Like write down what they naturally do. I think students do many things that they don't even think about that could be used as an activity. And if a student has a passion, like how can they dig more deeply into that? Do they turn something into a job and make money? Like a lot of kids want to be business majors now. Well, a lot of kids should start a business, but it could be as simple as starting a dog walking business or a lawn mowing business. So that's an example of something that anyone can do, potentially, as long as they're, well, I was going to say not in the city, but they could walk dogs in the city. Anyway, so that's just one way. A student could be as simple as being a reader. Like that's an activity. Do they like to read? Or if, again, going back to Jack, he could be reading, engineering journals, potentially.
And just to give an example, and I know Ellen's daughter had a similar example to my own daughter, who both had interest in baking, and and that's what that my daughter ended up writing about. And I only bring that up to show, baking anybody can do, been around for years, but, she showed an interest. She talked about, even how she liked to tinker, change recipes, try out different ingredients. So, you can take the most simplest of activities and kind of show more depth to it. So, and that's an everyday activity that any student can do.
Yeah, they can do trial and error through it. They can do intellectual curiosity. My daughter built upon the idea of the chemistry in baking and also the history of food. And tying in like cardamom coming from the Vikings, bringing cardamom to Sweden. So yes, same idea. And that just shows intellectual curiosity.
Ellen, there were a lot of questions about National Honor Society. Where should that be listed?
Okay, so it could be, generally you don't want to double dip, right? Because you have precious spaces. There are only 5 honors. So it could be an honor, but a lot of students often do volunteering with it. So it could be an activity. But if a student has a lot of really strong activities, National Honor Society isn't usually one of the most strong activities. So it really depends. A lot of students have National Honor Society as an award. So it's not like a do or die issue. If you can't fit it in because you have other more important things, great. If you have it and it's your only honor, that's fine too. So I wouldn't sweat it, but yes, if you if it happens to be your only honor and you have enough room for it as an activity and you are doing things like volunteering with it, then you could put it in both places.
What about anything you've heard these days about AI and how students should or shouldn't use it to help them write their essays?
Yeah, I almost put that in my list of things, but I had enough and I figured it might come up anyway. So the way so obviously AI should not be writing their essay. I've heard some people say that a student could throw down some ideas and see what the computer might spit out and not use it, but just see it as a structure. But what I recommend that students do, when I get students that say like they have 750, 800 words, they're over by 150, 200 or more words on the Common App when essay, the main personal statement, when they give it to me and I say to them, go put it in ChatGPT and ask it to reduce your essay to 650. Often the ChatGPT will reduce it down to like 300 because it's quite superfluous often. And so I just tell them, look at what it was
taking
cut.
out, yes.
Correct. And then you do not use that, but then use it to figure out where you can cut, because often I find that the essays can be like a one note and they can add so much more depth and reflection. And by culling it, by reducing it, then we can add more things in. I have an example of a student had written about rock climbing, and he was talking about failing all the time in rock climbing, just the activity itself. And then I knew that he wanted to study business, and I knew he had started businesses and they failed. So I said, why don't you write about your failed businesses in the middle of the essay, which will support the narrative of wanting to study business and show what you did with failure, that you were resilient. And then he also was teaching rock climbing. And I suggested that he talk about working with students, and he had a young girl that he was working with who was scared to try the rock climbing. And he shows a tender side of himself, like showing empathy to the girl. And so then the essay became fuller and there was so much more depth to it and more reflection, and we got to know more sides of this student than just rock climbing. But that became like this montage essay again, beginning and ending with rock climbing, but there was, in the heart, became much more.
Can you talk a little bit about the supplemental essays, how they're a little different and their importance?
Okay, so supplemental essays are probably more important than the personal statement. Colleges want to know that a student understands their college. Part of the reason they have supplemental questions is to see if the student has done their homework. They should often, depending upon the question, have college specifics in it. Probably your most common question is, why this college? It can be asked in different ways, but basically it boils down to why this college. And it should be approached as to why the college is a good fit for you and why you are a good fit for that college. And there should be specifics in it about what the student wants to, like which classes they might want to take, which clubs they might want to be involved in, which traditions they find compelling, and what skill sets they have currently that they want to bring to the college that may, be something that aligns with an activity they're currently doing and that the college has. So there's different ways to approach that, but it does come down to doing research, spending time understanding how the college is a good fit for the student. And so that's one of the most common ones. Another one is, why this major? Sometimes it's why this college and why this major in one essay. The really common one now is a community essay, like what's in a community that's important to you, or have have you had a conflict within a community or with people? How do you deal with conflict? How do you get along with people? Was your community diverse? Like those are all kind of fall under the community essays. It's a way for students to get their heritage in potentially, if they choose to talk about that as a community. Community could be church, it could be school, it could be a club, it could be your family, it could be your city. There's different ways to define community. That's a very popular question now. And then another one is like a favorite hobby. That's a good one. And then there are quirky ones like write a letter to your roommate. But the first three ones I mentioned are probably the most common.
And the other thing again, we heard from admissions officers about supplemental essays is they can kind of sense when the main essay is, well written. Maybe that's because the student either, might have gotten help with it or maybe just spent more time on it. And then the supplemental essays are not well written, and it just shows them that they were rushed and they didn't, spend the effort there, which, as Ellen is saying, sometimes the colleges view those as even more important than the main essay.
Yeah. And that can be a reason to it's like a hoop they have to jump through. And if they haven't done a good job, it gives the admissions officers for the highly competitive colleges are looking for reasons to say no, because if they only have a 4 or 5% acceptance rate, they're saying no much more often than they're saying yes. So not having well-written supplemental essays, if a student, yes, I find that they don't think that they're that important, and they do take time. So they put all their time into the personal statement, that reads beautifully, and then the personal statements, it's incongruous. And then you wonder, did they not write their personal statement? Did they get way too much help on it? And is this really the student's level of work? And are they not that good? And are they not that effective as a writer? So yes, the supplemental essays are becoming more and more crucial as more and more students apply to college.
So there were a lot of questions about, well, what if my student doesn't have a major yet? Like they don't have an interest, to talk about, that major that they want to study in college. Is that going to be held against them? Does that mean that they, that their essay isn't going to sound as good because they can't talk about what they want to study in college?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to, no. It can be hard at some universities because they have to figure out which college they're going to apply to under the university umbrella. But generally, they can do the College of Arts and Sciences, that might be a good choice. I know like Northeastern has an exploratory major. So a student could do that, and they do look for people to go into that program. I know that Lee Coffin at Dartmouth says that he loves it when kids apply undecided. So, but some people believe you should have more of a focus. Regardless, if a student is truly undecided, what have their passions been? Were they at one point really interested in marine biology and they really delved into that, but then they realized, what, I really don't want to be one. Well, tell us about that part. And then maybe tell us like why you decide you didn't, but those skill sets that you learn from that, or maybe you're leaping onto another interest from that, or that you have many different interests and kind of go into that you love to collect butterflies, but you also love to bake, and that you're excited to delve to have a plethora of that's a common essay word that kids use, of options in college, and to just explore more deeply different areas. So it doesn't have to be a negative, but students should show that they've had some level of intellectual curiosity and have passions on some level.
Okay, this is a little bit of a tactical question, but there were questions about dual enrollment. Where should those classes be listed?
Yeah, they are listed with the senior, like it's either going to be on the transcript, right? Or if it's senior year classes, because those are the ones listed where I put them in, it has a question about, do you have any college courses to submit? And so that would be an option there. If a student has taken a summer program, say, one of at a university, some of them give credit and some don't. So be aware of it, because if a student says they they check off that they did college courses, the college they're applying to is going to be looking for a transcript from that college. So if they took a summer classes at a college, like at a camp type of setup, and they didn't get credit, they should not be putting down that they, put the courses as if they're getting credit, because then they will not have a transcript to submit.
There was several questions about learning differences, or, and should that be discussed, included anywhere?
Okay, so you would mention learning differences if there is if the grades warrant it. Are the grades all over the place? Is there an upward trend? I would not mention a learning difference if the student has, perfect grades, give or take. So, and generally, hopefully, the narrative, if it's being mentioned, is I didn't know that I, was ADD in 9th or 10th grade, and that's why my grades are all over the place. But I found that out at the end of 10th and 11th. I got the help I needed, and my grades shot up. Like, that would be the explanation, and I would put that in the additional information section, and that would be the time I would mention it. And you might also ask the counselor in the letter to mention it too, if it's relevant. So you can have two parties coming at it. And maybe a teacher might even mention if they had the student as a freshman and then as a junior, and just show the drastic difference.
Do students need to have 10 activities? Like, do you feel like they have to fill in all 10 of those sections?
No. I think MIT has their own application. MIT doesn't care about demonstrated interest, but a very big way to show demonstrated interest or to disprove it, it's like, why would you have your own application? Because that is extra effort. So they say they don't care, but they make students fill out a separate application. I think they only take 3. I think they reduced it to 4, and now they might only have 3. They limit the number of activities the student can list. So no, you do not need to fill out all 10. An admissions officer might even thank you, because they have fewer to read. But if they're, say, 4 or 5, as long as they have depth, and it's a student is just showing off their passions, that's fine. Some people say, like, the admissions officer might only read the first 3 in depth and kind of skim the rest. So put the top ones at the top and bundle them to show impact.
Okay, so I'm going to read this question. I've heard mixed advice on whether logged volunteer hours in connection with things like National Honor Society do or don't count in the student's favor. Should they be included? And is it ideal to show other volunteer hours besides these?
Okay, some people think that every student has to have volunteer hours, or they won't get into college. Colleges don't care specifically where a student spends their time, as long as the student is doing something they love and it's kind of productive, right? So if your student happens to have a lot of volunteer hours, hopefully it's something they enjoy doing, learn something from, and have some depth in it. So then I would try to spell out as succinctly as I could some of the activities the student did to get those hours. So it just depends what they've been doing. Some students jump all around doing all different types of things, and other students spend a lot of time like on tutoring. Well, I'd like to know how many kids your student tutored. What subject in particular did they focus on? What kind of growth did they see potentially with the student? Did a student start with them and have B's, and at the end of the year they had A's in a particular subject? Do they how do they approach teaching? Do they try to figure out learning differences and work with each student differently? So those are ways to kind of blow up volunteering, to get more into how the student thinks and the impact the student is making. So if there's volunteering hours, I want to see impact.
So what's your advice for the student who might be very gifted, but might not just necessarily be a good writer? you can be very smart, very gifted, but that doesn't mean your talent lies in writing. And so how does that student best, like put together their application?
Well, I would suggest they get help. I mean, it's imperative if they can't communicate effectively what their strengths are, that's gonna be a limitation. So I would make sure that someone else is proofreading it for the student, and it doesn't have to be, the language can be very approachable. Like when I work with some students who aren't the greatest writers, like I will type down what they're saying to me. And so if your student struggles that way, maybe you as the parent type down what your student is saying, and then you go back and together like edit it. And that can be a really great, or a student can do speech to text and see how that looks. Sometimes the way they speak, they want the student's voice, and sometimes that's a really good way to start. And then, beef it up a bit, obviously check the grammar, but that might be a really good starting point.
But the point is, these essays aren't like best-selling novels.
Yeah.
They don't have to be, beautifully written. They have to be well composed,
Yes.
meaning that your student is getting across what they want to get across about who they are, and that somebody can easily read it and kind of get that information from it. That's
Yeah.
really the most, and and if maybe the language is simpler because your student isn't a great writer, that's okay, as long as it gets across what they want the admissions to know about them.
Yeah, I would just add to that, I would say that, writing is kind of an inside look into a student's mind. And so it should just be, logical progression, right? Makes sense. But some students that are really good writers that I get, like that are creative writers, I have to say to them, you need to call the description.
They go too far.
Too much description, and they're losing precious words to describe this amazing, floral patch in their backyard. And it's like, and the student isn't even applying for creative writing. And I have to say, you write really well, but this is not the place to go on and on with the descriptions.
Okay, switching a little bit. What about online classes, CLEP tests? Where do they get listed? Even like online courses like Coursera?
So in Jack's case, we listed them as engineering student and the classes he took, taking his own initiative. The CLEP, the CLEPs, I don't know, Debbie, like CLEP, they're supposed to get credit, right? Like,
right.
I would ask your guidance counselor. I'm not sure what to do with the CLEP. I don't know if you get a transcript from CLEP, and then if you do, if you're putting it in similarly to, dual enrollment. Usually dual enrollment is put onto a high school's transcript, usually, because that's done in coordination with the school and the community college. I would Google where you would put CLEP on the Common App. I just
or
don't have an
honestly,
answer.
and ask the school counselor, I think is
Yeah,
like,
assuming they would know, but yes, I
Yeah.
don't have an answer specifically for CLEP. But I know like something for Coursera or edX, you would just put in the activity section.
So somebody's asking, we brought up the fact that some schools do have their own application. What if a school has their own application, but also is on the Common App? Is there advantage to do one over the other?
Yeah, you would think that filling out the college's specific application would be an advantage. But when they sign on, when they join the Common App, they have to agree that they will not give preference to students who filled out their college, their own application, the college's application. So we have to trust that they are abiding by that. And I would just suggest, it's so much easier to just use the Common App. The students have enough things to do. Now, if for some reason they get everything done and you don't fully trust, you think there might be an edge and it's not that complicated, sure, then do it. But most of these kids, I think 80% of the applications go in the last 24 to 48 hours, Debbie, of due dates. So I would just go, cross my fingers that my student's going to get it done through the Common App without complicating things.
Okay. And let's see. Oh, how about just talk a tiny bit, and then we'll just have one other question after this about test scores. When, in your opinion, should students submit their test scores, and when should they not? And the same thing related to AP scores.
Okay, so test scores, you want it at the very least be between the 25th and the 75th average of that college. Now, the
Or
schools,
even the 50th.
yeah, I said at the
Yeah,
very least the
yeah,
25th. Yeah, exactly. Ideally, you're the 50th and above, if not above the 75th, obviously, but that should be the first benchmark. Are you at least above the 25th percentile? If a college doesn't give you the option, because some schools now are no longer test optional, you just have to send it in. What I would say is for the colleges that have gone back to test scores, like Brown, so a bunch of the Ivies, I would go and look what their test scores were, just out of curiosity, to see what they were before the pandemic, because they're so inflated now. Because obviously the scores are going to come down, because now that students have to submit, you're going to get, the lower numbers back in there. So that could help a student see whether or not they really are competitive if they have to submit the scores. Regarding the APs, what you do is you put in the school name and say AP credit, and the schools, most of them list which scores will give credit. So in some classes, 3 might give credit. In other ones, they might need a 5. It really depends. Usually it varies between like a 4 and a 5 for the more competitive school. Like they might give you, for Calc BC, they might give you, if a student gets a 4, they get credit. But on something easier like AP Art, it might have to be a 5. But a lot of state universities give credit for 3s. So if they give credit for it, then feel free to share. If your student does not have a high enough score, colleges are not supposed to assume why a student doesn't have to report it. That's up to the student, and the admissions officers are not supposed to assume why a student didn't submit a score.
And I've heard admissions officers say just that. If the score's not there, it's not there. They don't think more of it.
Yes, they aren't supposed to say, oh, the student got a 1. For all they know, you were violently ill that day.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they aren't supposed to do anything. And again, if they're reading really quickly, they may not even catch, like, from the transcript to the scores and try to match it up, because that all takes time.
And along the same lines, people have been asking about super scoring. Like, which schools do that these days?
I think pretty much it's more like which schools don't do.
I was just gonna say, in the past,
Yeah.
I feel like, old person in this space, but before COVID, and before so many schools went test optional, that was like another thing you had to research. Oh, does the school super score?
Yeah.
But quite honestly, now the philosophy is if you're submitting their score and you want to put the best score from sections that come from different test dates, do it. The school is going to actually, usually most schools will super score themselves because they want to take the best score for their own records.
Yeah, and they also let you self-report. Back when my older daughter applied, you had to pay for every single report to go to every college. And so now a lot of schools let students self-report, and then if they're accepted, they have to then submit the proper test scores. That and the super scoring, I was going to say something else. I know, back in the day, like Yale used to make you report every single test you took. So these colleges definitely have lightened up around that type of those aspects.
And I'm trying to think what else. I think that's about it. I mean, it's almost 9:30. It's an hour and a half. Ellen, thank you for all of your expertise, your time, your advice and tips. And hopefully this was helpful to everybody here. A recording will go out. The link to the recording will go out tomorrow. And all I can say to students is good luck. Keep getting, your work done. I'm trying to look at my calendar. It is August 18th. A lot of schools start, before Labor Day. Some schools start right after Labor Day. In these last weeks before school start, get as much as you can get done, because once school hits, it just, you have to put your focus on school, and things just become more hectic. And so even in the last 10 days, maybe before school starts, if you can focus on really cleaning up your Common App essay, that would be great.
Yeah, a
So-
lot of the students I'm working with have already started school. And I would like to say, continuing what Debbie said, filling out the Common App and doing all the pieces is like having another AP for the fall of senior year. So they are already overtaxed and very busy. So yes, the more that they can get things done now, if they even in this week, and they just say, I'm going to do something every single day, it just makes their senior year so much better, and it makes home life so much better.
So go out and finish those Common Apps.
Good luck, everyone.
Okay, good night. Good
Good
luck.
night.
Bye.